And we did a contest on the internet back in the 2000. We were probably one of the first to utilize incentivized crowdsourcing. And we took all of our geological knowledge, threw it up on the web, and asked the world to tell us where we'd find the next 6 million ounces of gold in our mine. And there were 1,400 people from 50 countries that took down a 400 megabyte file. And it worked really well. We offered $500,000 in prize money.
Wow.
We ended up finding a couple $2 billion worth of gold out of that. And it showed me that the biggest gold mine in the world is not in the ground, but it's between everybody's ears. And how do you connect that knowledge and insight?
Hey everyone, this is Rob Kientz with Gold Silver Pros and Stock Pulse, and I am joined by a mining icon to the program, Rob McEwen, who's the chief owner of McEwen Mining, which is 3 producing mines in Nevada, Ontario, and Argentina. He was the founder of Goldcorp, and he took the company from a market capitalization of 50 million to over 8 billion. And at McEwen Mining, he owns 17% of the company. Rob, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you very much, Robert.
Well, thank you for joining us here on Hunting Hidden Treasures. And we're really excited to have you on just because you have so much history in the space. And it's really perfect, Rob, for what we want to talk about here. Really, we want to get your story and the story leading up to Mux and where you guys are now, and sort of your history of hunting these hidden treasures and the gold and silver and copper. Where did you really kind of get your start in the mining space, if you don't mind me asking?
It started at the dining room table when I was just became a teenager. My father was an investment dealer, and at the time he became quite interested in gold. He was looking at all the IMF, the International Monetary Fund's annual reports, and noticing the amount of gold being produced in the world. And he looked at that, compared it to the amount of money that was being issued by governments around the world, and said, price of gold should be going up. So there were many stories about gold and why it was the ultimate form of monetary wealth. And that then from there, after college, I went into the investment industry, did research, sales, fund management, investment banking, all in the precious metal space. So I was deeply involved in that. And through that period, I met a lot of prospectors and geologists and mining engineers. And they kept making discoveries. And I said, we haven't exhausted all of the large discoveries in the world. There's still more deposits to be found. And I decided, well, maybe I should leave the investment industry and see if I can jump in to what I call the jet stream of, and see if we can make a discovery. So I jumped in to a hostile takeover battle as a white knight, supporting the management team, and bought control of 2 mining companies. And that was the start of transforming Goldcorp, which at the time was a closed-end company that I controlled, into a mining company. And over the course of about 8 years, I took 5 companies and compressed them into one and focused on exploration. And a mile below surface, at a mine called the Red Lake Mine, we discovered quite a bit of gold. And we said, well, we'll build a new mine. The new mine grew to a certain, people said, well, it could be this big. And I said, well, we're finding 30% more gold every year. Why are we going to build it this size? We should be building it bigger. And anyhow, that mine went from producing 50,000 ounces of gold a year to 500,000 ounces of gold a year. And the cost of production went from $360 an ounce to $60 an ounce. So I became a really big believer in gold, and I'm a large investor in the space, and it's either in bullion or in the junior space where I see the biggest returns.
It's very interesting, Rob, that you mentioned your background it wasn't as, a geologist. It was really on the financial side, and it was through your father who had looked at the monetary system. A lot of what, our enthusiasts at Gold Silver Pros want to talk about is just that subject, gold's place in the world as previously as a currency, and whether or not gold will have a role in the new system. Interesting that you started off that way, more on the financial side, because a lot of what we see in this space are geologists and financiers who really just look at it from the business perspective, not more from the perspective of why gold has been historically important as a monetary asset. And then you ended up mentioning bullion and that opportunity. So I kind of wanted to capitalize on that first before we go into the mining. What do you see, Rob, is the opportunity right now for gold? Do you think that original proposition that you and your father had explored is still how you feel about gold, or have your thoughts on gold, as a currency or as an alternative to the fiat system? Do you still hold those views?
Deeply committed to that view.
Okay.
I just look at what's happened over the last few years. Governments have been reckless in their monetary stimulation.
Mm-hmm.
They've compounded the situation by keeping interest rates low and encouraging a massive speculative bubble in a number of asset classes. And I'm also a big student of economic history. And if you look back in time, we've seen these periods before, similar periods. And there's a time when the excitement stops and the precious metals start running higher as people retreat to those areas to protect their wealth. So
very interesting. In your transition from working in finance to jumping into controlling a couple of gold mine companies and then eventually building Goldcorp, it's interesting. I want to ask this from an entrepreneurial perspective. I recently quit a full-time position, but doing a lot more in this field and promoting, the industry and working with the industry and doing conferences and things. And it's been an interesting transition from that world into what I do now. Did you have any apprehension about jumping in and buying some gold miners and getting into that? Or had you felt comfortable enough in your time on the financial side that you thought that you could do that?
I guess I looked at it and I thought I could put two companies together and increase the value significantly. It wasn't a matter of 1 + 1 equaling 2. I thought we could get 5 out of putting companies together. And I didn't think the companies I bought were looking at the problem statement correctly. So now I can say I jumped in thinking we're going to change the world immediately. And once I bought control of these companies, I sat as a director and I just said, they're not going in the right direction. So after a year, I took out all the senior management, replaced the boards, stepped in as the CEO. And then I learned that this is an industry with an enormous amounts of inertia, and the freedom that you have in the financial markets to come and go if you have a problem. Like if you have an investment that's not working out, you just sell it. You can't do that in mining. And it was as though both my feet were in concrete and I just couldn't move quickly. So it was all about attacking that inertia. And along the way, we ended up at one point, I was introducing technology and different approaches than they'd been used to. And we ended up with a labor strike that went for 46 months. And we didn't produce an ounce of gold from our Red Lake mine.
Right.
And I got a death threat out of it and a couple of other things. But we broke through it. And I mentioned the type of progress we made at that mine from 50,000 ounces to 500,000 ounces by trying to change the view of what we could do and how we go about mining. So
it's an interesting comment you make, because I do notice that the mining industry, much like a lot of industries, when I started in tech 25 years ago, it was a much different industry than it is today in terms of who's working, how we approach things, women involvement, and just how that industry is changed. Did you feel like you had a lot of pushback when you were trying to introduce technology and sort of change the scope of how you guys were mining? Did your management team follow you? How is the industry towards that? Was there a lot of resistance to that? Because if you do it, maybe other miners will say, oh no, if he has success doing this, maybe we're going to have to do this. Was there resistance from that standpoint?
I think when you're introducing anything new to a group of people, and you're asking them to change the way they do their work, there's resistance. It's sort of, show me why this is going to be better, and it's not going to create more work for me. So yes, there was a resistance, but as we progressed, they could see progress, and they started accepting those changes. And we did a contest on the internet back in the 2000. We were probably one of the first to utilize incentivized crowdsourcing. And we took all of our geological knowledge, threw it up on the web, and asked the world to tell us where we'd find the next 6 million ounces of gold in our mine. And there were 1,400 people from 50 countries that took down a 400 megabyte file. And it worked really well. We offered $500,000 in prize money. And
wow.
We ended up finding a couple $2 billion worth of gold out of that. And it showed me that the biggest gold mine in the world is not in the ground, but it's between everybody's ears. And how do you connect that knowledge and insight? So
that's very interesting. Would you credit that with what made your company successful in terms of doing those types of things that were maybe contrarian to the way that the industry had done them? Was that your advantage in building Goldcorp, do you think? Your ability to look at potential new ways of doing things and separating yourself maybe from the pack a little bit?
Definitely. It's very important to differentiate yourself in the marketplace. And so we were a little gold company, and they're big gold companies, and investors come in and say, well, which one do I buy? Which story is memorable? And I remember going in after we announced this contest back in 2000, talking to some institutional investors, and you'd start off and they said, no, wait a minute. You're doing something on the internet, and you're a mining company. Internet is new, mining company is old. What are you doing? This is like a children's game, pin the tail on the donkey or something. And I said, no, we're using today's technologies to apply to yesterday's problems to get a solution that's better. And they didn't get it at first. And then, a year went by and everyone goes, hey, that was a really cool idea. But it's impossible until you try it. So when I mentioned our cost got down to $60 an ounce, my largest cost was corporate tax, income tax. And I said, well, how do we deal with that? So we started accumulating gold and not selling, making it, but not selling it. And we got up to 270,000 ounces stored in a vault. And I said, well, here you have value. The accountants didn't know how to deal with that, nor did the industry for quite a while. But I thought, why should we sell it and pass it along when the price of gold's going up and the tax rate is going to be lower in the future? So
it's interesting that you mentioned you did that for taxes, given what's going on in the market. And I'll just use silver as an example. Silver is very close to the cost to pull it out of the ground. I think when we look at shortages, like you look at Silver Institute, shortages the last 4 years running with what's being produced on a yearly basis and what's being demanded by industry for jewelry, computer applications, but also for investment. Do you think that could the silver producers use withholding silver to kind of address that issue, not the tax issue, but like a pricing issue? And the reason I ask, I talked to several CEOs of silver companies or developing mines, and they're struggling right now with silver prices and how they're going to show profit, especially if silver just kind of sits here for a while, like it has been the last 18 months or so. are there ways in which you think the mining industry can say, okay, prices are probably really close right now to our cost? Are there tools that we can leverage, to provide, more money? Would it be withholding the silver? Would it be, some people have pitched, well, maybe we financialize it and put options on our silver, put our silver in a warehouse and do an option strategy. Mm-hmm. Are there different strategies that miners can use, do you think, to deal with the price problem and the cost problem that we're having specifically in silver right now?
Well, several companies have tried and I think successfully sold silver coins in the past. Mm-hmm. So they would take their silver and mint it into a coin and get a premium above the spot price. Mm-hmm. I think whenever you could look for a way to move beyond producing the material and do something value added. I think Anglo-American tried jewelry with gold, getting up because jewelry sells at multiples of the spot price. First Majestic did it with their silver coins, and a couple of other companies did that. We had the luxury of having a very low cost of production, so we could afford to withhold up to 20-30% of our production and not impact our operation. And we could have all the sustaining capital and pay all the wages and make the investment needed to keep it running. But if you're right close to your cost of operation, then you either have to think about, well, how do I improve the recovery rates when I process this? Or how do I lower my unit cost? And that became a little difficult with prices of diesel fuel going up and consumables going up and really catching a lot of people off guard as a result of the disruption to the logistic systems that COVID rendered. But I think if you throw the idea around enough, you'll get some alternatives that might not have been considered and you could use.
Going back to your history with Goldcorp, is there a point in time at which you said, okay, this is going to be special and I know it's going to work? Was it when you acquired the original two, or was it further along the line where you felt comfortable and said, okay, I think we have something special here?
I always felt it was special. This one particular mine, the Red Lake mine, it was right next door to Placer Dome's Campbell mine. And it's curious, I go back in time, in the late 40s, there was a promoter, and he owned both the Campbell mine property and the one we owned. And he didn't have enough money to develop both of those properties, so he took a coin out of his pocket, flipped it, and said, okay, heads, I sell Campbell. Now, the Campbell mine, they both started out with pretty good high grade. And then over the years, the Campbell mine kept finding it, and our mine, they seemed to lose it. Mm-hmm. And everybody thought, well, as you went deeper, the geological structure changed, and we just were on the unfortunate end of that change. They had, when I came in and into control of the mine we had, they had produced 9 million ounces and we'd produced 3, and our costs were going up. So I always thought there was something there. There was debt on the books, and so I wanted to clean the debt off. And then once we cleaned the debt off, I said, my CFO and I said, well, let's put 10 million into exploration. And 4 months later, my head of exploration came up and said, I've got some drill holes you might like. And I said, oh, what are they? He said, we have 9 drill holes. The average grade is 9 ounces per ton, and the average width is 8 feet. I went, all right, we got to tell the world about this. And I knew we were on we were tightly gripping the tail of a rocket that was just soaring into the sky. And we just kept running on that enthusiasm. So
from Goldcorp now to Mux, can you explain that transition a little bit and that part of it? What led you to start the new company?
Well, Goldcorp, I was at for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
And as the years went by, I found more and more security regulations coming out. And I felt it was inhibiting the board. They were becoming more cautious, more concerned about compliance with just a myriad of regulations that were coming out. We weren't doing anything wrong, and we won a number of awards for our financial disclosure. But I felt, if you can think of the image of a bull in a field and how they chase red flags, and I was just running at all these, which seemed to be well-intended but poorly applied regulations and compliance issues. And I said, I'm really wasting my time here. I should be focused on building value, not fighting these regulations that I think are nonsensical. And at one point, I just said, okay, I've had enough of this. We had 400 million in cash. We were one of the lowest cost gold producers in the world. We had no debt. And I just went, I think it's time for me to leave. So I looked around. I saw another company that was trading at a big discount to what I thought its value was. And I thought, well, if we could put it together with us, we could get a triple or better in our share price. So I approached this company and said, hey, I'm going to leave. You can come in and run this. And I think we'll have all our shareholders will make a lot more money. And so it was at almost an at the money price. It was about a 7% premium. We came together and the market loved it. And I stepped away. And then I thought, oh, what am I going to do now? I hadn't really given any thought to it. When I was running Goldcorp, I always invested in juniors for Goldcorp, viewing it as a farm team. And we were able to, through those investments, not have to go to the capital markets that often because of the gains we were making in the juniors. Were covering the capital expenditures we were making building a new mine. So then I thought, well, I'll just keep up investing in juniors. And I would buy anywhere from 10 to 30% of juniors that I thought were attractively priced. And not all of them, but several of them did really well. And at one point I said, well, I should probably put a couple of these together. And that I had a company in Nevada called US Gold and another one in Argentina called Minera Andes, and put the two together and created McEwen Mining. The timing was not the best, I have to say, because we put them together in January of 2012, and that was just the start of a deep decline into 2015, where I mean, it's a total washout in the market. And we came back, and I mean, I went in at 36 cents, and we did a financing at I think about $6 a few months later, and then it ran up to $10. And I thought, wow, there's something happening here. But we hadn't drilled a hole. I mean, there was irrational exuberance, I think.
Sure.
So we've spiked up and down a bit. The last 3 years have been really challenging. Our operations would give guidance, and they failed to deliver on it. And we're coming out of it right now, and I really see some really good things ahead. But nothing goes in a straight line. You have some good times. No. And there's some
We've learned that the hard way over the last 10 or 15 years, haven't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I do think, from my perspective, I do think gold and silver, definitely will recover. And of course, I run Gold Silver Pros. I'm going to say that I'm a bull. But when you look at a lot of what's happened the last few years, it seems as though we're in this stage now in the economy where it's financial consolidation and a lot of worry about where people are going to go. And I think they're going to come back to gold and silver. I think that 5,000-year history is going to reemerge. And I particularly, when I go to conferences, Rob, I see it in the younger crowd. We were at Silver Symposium. I was presenting a roundtable with some silver producers. And we had a younger gentleman in his 20s who is big into the crypto space. And he said, why silver? And we sort of talked to him a little bit about silver. And he literally got up right then and there, left, went to our booth where one of my friends is a bullion dealer, and just bought silver right then and there. And so I do think that there is interest from the younger crowd coming in, because I do think they see what's going on in the financial system. Are like, hey, this is going to be our life the next 34 years. We got to figure out how to navigate this. And I do see that coming back in. And I do think that eventually will reach, the mining sector as well. I wanted to talk a little bit about how you guys are structured, getting a little bit more into McEwen Mining. The biggest thing I see, there's tons of things to like about the company, but you guys are sitting at like 48 million, less than 48 million shares outstanding. How in the heck, Rob, do you build a company and not, dilute it down to 200 to 300 million shares like a lot of these companies are expected to do? What was your advantage here with McEwen Mining, where you've kept it, nice and tight for people and kept that, that share price up to, which I assume, keeps the interest of your investors?
Well, probably taking a first look at our shares outstanding might be a little misleading, because we just went through a share consolidation, 10 for 1 in July, which was, I found, painful. I don't like those. I like splitting shares, but I don't like. We, as I mentioned, the operational issues we had, where we produced less gold than was forecast, our revenues were less, and some of our capital needs were high. So you found yourself going back to the market several times. But now it's tight. And the big thing, I think, one of the elements that was obscured by the operating problems of the last few years is a copper project we have called Los Azules. But I think it could turbocharge both McEwen Mining and itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about Los Azules in Argentina, a little bit more about how you hunt for stuff. So since this is hunting hidden treasures, how did you find Los Azules, and how do you find these types of projects? What's your process for hunting for these projects? Do you just pick things up that people send to you that look interesting? Do you get boots on the ground and go out and look at it? Is there like a team that you have that helps you really focus on different areas of the world? Or can you just describe your process for how you find these? Because you've had a history of finding great projects, and I'm sure everyone wants to know basically how you do it.
It starts by keeping the front door open and listening to as many stories as possible.
Okay.
And sometimes they've been scrounging. They've been going around looking at all sorts of things, and you never know who's going to come in with a really interesting story. And that, I think, is what's always excited me about it, is the power of a discovery. And it's saying, well, how do you see it early? And you don't see all of them early. Some of them just fizzle out, and you go, oh, that wasn't a good investment. So the treasure can be at an early discovery stage, but it can also be where they're transitioning and bringing a property on stream. And you can get some big boosts in value there. But I think the early stage where you're looking is that discovery stage.
Yeah. Mining, I've been on a few mine tours. The first one I ever went on was Silvercrest's Las Chispas back in 2018 with Eric and team there and Chris. And it was a lot of fun for me because I really got into the exploration side of things, but not a geologist, obviously a technologist. My background's IT, but I just loved going and looking at the rocks and looking at the computer system and figuring out how the deposit folded or how it formed and where the metals really are. And it gets extremely complex, but it's also a bit of a dangerous business. I remember hanging off a ladder down in Las Chispas thinking, if I let go of this ladder, they're never going to find my body. It can be a dangerous business at times. Any stories for us in your early days of exploration? Were there moments at which you thought, wow, this can be a dangerous business and, we have to be careful?
In Upper BC, I was looking at a property, and the night before, we'd had dinner with the people behind the company, and maybe had one or two drinks more than needed. 6 o'clock in the morning, someone's pounding on my door, said, "We got to get in the chopper." And we're going up this river. It's a very narrow river valley that's winding into the mountains. And at one point, I'm thinking this pilot is not putting us in a good position, because he was going through a cloud, a low-lying cloud. And I'm thinking, I hope he has a really good idea where this river valley is, because we might just end up on the side of a mountain, rather quickly.
Sure.
The only other, I mentioned it earlier on, was during the strike, I got a death threat. And in my home, there were 2 occasions where SWAT teams showed up on concern, full body armor, automatic weapons. And I took the precaution of having the windows in the basement and the first floor of the house replaced with bulletproof glass.
Wow, that's amazing. So was that a result of like an NGO, or was that more, what caused the SWAT teams to come out to your house?
There was a threat that
that was back on that project before, where you had the labor and then the SWAT teams had to come.
There were just a couple of occasions where it felt that people were getting too close.
Oh my goodness gracious! I didn't know that. Well, thank you for sharing that. Getting back to McEwen Mining, this is your venture now. You've got copper, you've got gold, you got silver. You're all over the Americas. What's next for this company for the next 3 to 6 months? If investors are interested in aligning with you, which I assume they would be. You're serially successful, have done a great job at finding projects that have done well for your investors. What's next for McEwen Mining? I know you may be talking about that copper project, maybe you can spin off into another company. Is that the main thing that we need to be looking for? Are there other things going on with the gold and silver as well that investors want to pay attention to? The
precious metals, we seem to have turned the corner. As I said, the Fox mine is producing gold below industry costs. I expect the Gold Bar mine was ridiculously high cost because of a COVID contractor, carbonaceous ore. We're moving into a new deposit that's higher grade. It's there's no carbonaceous ore, and the strip ratio to develop the area is half what we were doing earlier. So I'm expecting better numbers there. Our exploration up at the Fox mine is finding more gold. We have a preliminary economic assessment that shows another 9-12 years there ahead of us. And what we've been trying to do with the exploration is outline additional gold that could shorten the payback period, and it appears to be happening. In Mexico, we bought this new process plant we'll be putting up, and that would take less than a year, and good costs there. Argentina is not bad. And then it's looking and saying, well, where are the areas you could improve on? And that's where technology comes into play. We're using some hyperspectral analysis just to look at some of our operations to get a better sense of the mineralogy. And I keep looking at technologies. I saw one the other day. I was at a conference on space and exploration in space. And this one group was launching, they have a device using hypersonic speeds to launch satellites. So they're launching at about 4,500 miles per hour. And they said, and they had a background in mining. And they said, well, we can do this tunneling. And I went, okay, how's this work? And they said, well, they're firing projectiles at rock. And they feel that they can go 5 times faster than normal drill and blast, and at half the cost.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, that
would be a boon to the industry for sure. Anything you can do to reduce that drilling and exploration cost would be huge for the miners, I think.
Yes. So you just keep looking at that, and where is artificial intelligence? There's people playing on that side. It's graphical depictions. I think the industry has to tell a better story too.
Yes, it does.
They're doing lots of good things for, addressing the concerns that mining has generated through its past practices. In our copper project, I asked an architect who's very prominent in the field of green, sustainable living buildings to come into our meetings about the team we have working on the copper project. And I said, I'd like you to try to re-envision mining for us. And how do we reduce the carbon? How do we reduce the effluents? How do we reduce the amount of water we're using? How do we make our buildings recyclable? And so it's altering the perception and trying to widen the audience who take a look at mining. I think mining is an industry, it's an old industry, and there's enormous opportunity to apply today's technologies to it to make it a more profitable industry, a more responsible industry. And
I agree with you there, and it's exciting to see some of the technology coming on, and that's kind of right up my alley. Being a technologist, love seeing how computer information systems are now used to build mappings out, the different technologies designed to extract more of the metal, from the solution and higher recovery rates. So a lot of that is in sort of the processing process. Do you think? Last question for you. Do you think technology is going to sort of take over the exploration process as well, in automating some of this to where it may require a little bit less individual commitment to going to a site? Do you think there are ways in which technology can be used there? Or do you still think that mining will always have that aspect of, where the streets have no name, people have to go out there and just sort of punch holes and see if they can find it?
I'd like to move away from just punching holes to determine it. It's the time frames are difficult. They're too long, I find. And that's what we want to do, abbreviate time. I mean, you look at the world today and everything is almost instantaneous communication.
Yes.
But here, I've got a drill hole. Let me see, I'm sitting there waiting for it to get to the depth. And then I get the core, I look at it, but then I have to send it out for assaying, and it takes a couple of weeks. And so wherever we can abbreviate it and make the job easier for the geologist, I don't think technology will completely replace it, because you need the lateral thinker in there that can connect just separate points and say, there's something there I didn't see before. And the machine didn't tell me it was there. And it's really about, can you formulate the right question to solve the problem?
That's right. Having the right question will lead you to the right answer. And sometimes it's difficult to figure out what the question is.
Precisely.
I do think that something I talked about Silver Symposium, was talking to Lauren McGaw, Dr. Peter McGaw's daughter, about, being a young person and getting into these projects. And I asked her, I said, do you see young people getting in? She said, for the first time in my career, I do see young people getting in, and it is encouraging to see them coming. And I'm wondering, Rob, if that new, fresh set of eyes, the focus on technology, the younger generations, do you think they're going to make big changes in the mining sector when they start to come up?
Yes. I think we need to make it more appealing to the young, but I think, graphical presentations, pictures are worth 1,000 words. Don't give me, I'm always fighting with our geologists. I see a diagram they've created and go, what's all this mean? And I try to put myself in the shoes of someone who, the 98% of the world that didn't take a geology degree or didn't take a mining engineering degree. Maybe it's 99.5%, but you have to help them understand what you're showing them. Otherwise, and that's a big challenge I have. Yeah,
I agree with you. Rob, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining Hunting Hidden Treasures here on Stock Polls. We appreciate it very much and hope to have you back on the program.
Thanks for the interest. Enjoyed the time. Have a great day.
Thank you, Rob.